I've received a lot of messages and comments from people asking for help, or just like wondering why they're feeling kind of crushed against a wall, feeling like they've got no options, feeling like it's really hard to move forwards, or also feeling like there's resistance against them, like there's energies or like a weird kind of energetic field working against them, specifically. And so I've looked into some of these, and I can absolutely see some cool patterns. And what I wanted to share today was how to find the most difficult times each year. Now, obviously, this is about feel good astrology, like how can you feel good? And actually, what I'm trying to teach you here is how to recognize where it might be challenging, so that you can kind of step out of things that are highly pressured and find a way to kind of sidestep, kind of a bit like Neo in the Matrix, how he kind of dodges the bullets. How can you find your slightly challenging times and then make other arrangements? So what this short session is dedicated to is finding the sort of pinpoint times. Now, there are some times in your life where there are some really big themes anyway. Every chart will have some of these. No chart is exempt difficulty or challenge. Some people right now might be going through their first Saturn return, their second Saturn return, their Chiron return. I've been through that. They might have big squares, like where Saturn and Neptune are. If you've got an outer planet working on your sun, your moon, or an angle, or several at the same time, that's going to be kind of ramping up the volume, so any kind of stress, because there's a change coming in, is likely to be at a high level already, because that's what happens, when we've got outer planets on our angles, our sun, our moon. They really increase our levels of knowing that change is coming. Outer planets are there to create change for us. They are there to widen our perspective, give us a redirect, like a course correction maybe. And often these lessons come, at us thick and fast and hard. They often seem quite unsolvable. Outer planets can really create a situation where we really don't know what's going on. But there are other times as well. It's not just the outer planets that cause problems. Also, the sun and the moon and their patterns, and Mercury and Venus can absolutely cause regular patterns. In particular, if you notice there's a time of year when things just seem to go a little bit wonky, it's probably because of your sun and moon. So I'm going to teach you a couple of things to identify about your chart, the 6, in fact. And once you've got these 6, you can write them down in your diary. You might see that they run into each other, and that's kind of interesting to observe as well. But once you've identified these times where you might feel that energies are quite oppositional, you'll be able to understand why all of a sudden it feels like life is just gone completely out of control. So here's my thoughts. So when these things happen, we might feel bent out of shape, exhausted. We also often question if we're on the right path when we have these moments, and we might give up or retreat, step back, which is completely understandable. And we might also find, at times when our sun and moon are opposed, in particular, we might feel we might start to act more out of the negative side of our sun and moon, because they're under pressure. Our planets all have an expression, like when the sun is really well aspected, the sun is about your vitality, your joy, your natural, easy expression. When your sun is challenged, you feel threatened, like your vitality feels threatened. It feels like it's not safe to be yourself. When your moon is really beautifully aspected and framed, it's like it's lovely to sort of go with the flow of your emotions, and you feel just naturally in harmony with things. But when things are over your moon, things can feel very, very personal, and things can blow up out of control. So I always think watching how is your planet being impacted right now? Is it being positively impacted or negatively? So let's have a look. So these are the times. So the first one to find, and to be able to do this and plot this, you need to have your birth chart in front of you or know the degrees of, first of all, the sun and the moon. These are the most obvious ones, by the way. So first of all, locate where your sun and your moon are, and then go online. You can use an ephemeris. I really like the ephemerises or the ephemeries that you can print off from astro.com. I think they're really, really helpful. Or you can also go to astroseek.com. I think they're really helpful. So find the date for when the full moon occurs, and the full moon, is in opposition to your natal sun. Because when the moon is in opposition to your natal sun, there's a bit of a challenge to be yourself. It's like there's something emotional going on. It might be somebody else's emotions that are coming in to try and challenge how you are being yourself. But at the time of the full moon, the sun is also around your sun. I mean, it is kind of easy to calculate because it's sometime around your birthday, usually in the month of your birthday. But if you find the time of the exact full moon, that's going to be one of these potential danger times. Then if you find the date for the full moon that's in opposition to the sign of your natal moon. So in this example, this is a completely made up chart, by the way. I mean, it will belong to somebody, but no one I know. But this moon at 27 Pisces, we would be looking, when is the full moon in Virgo? This is the opposite sign. And so this year it's September the 11th, and that full moon is at 18 degrees Virgo. Again, this time you'll have the sun on your moon, and you'll have the moon in opposition. These are times when there's a huge amount of stress. If you think, and it's funny that I'm recording this a couple of days before the actual full moon in Libra anyway, but if you think about this, when the full moon comes up, this is a time when hospitals notice that things are a little bit more busy in A&E. There is a lot more kind of palpable stress around at the time of the full moon. So if you also think there are 2 full moons every year that also match the recipe of your birth chart, and so not only are they raising the temperature around everyone else, but they're raising the temperature around you and how you feel personally. So full moons absolutely bring out the crazies in people, but when there's a full moon that's matching your own full moon, that will matching your own sun, your own moon, or your own full moon, that's going to be absolutely bringing out so much more in you. Then another time when this might happen is, so it's good to find the date for when the sun is in opposition to your natal sun. So in the case of this example, when the sun goes into 10 degrees Libra, we've got that date. And similarly, you would then do the same for when the sun is in opposition to your natal moon. Again, grab that date. And then the final 2 I would consider, and you can do this with Mars as well, if you like. Mars is a bit more slow moving. So, he might not sort of crowd an area at the same time. But if you then do it with Mercury and Venus, see when Mercury and Venus are in opposition to your natal sun. And then see when Mercury and Venus are in opposition to your natal moon. Now, if you're born at around the time of the new moon or the full moon, the effects of these are so much more polarized. There's a lot to be going on for. You'll see, I've put all the dates in date order here. So August, right the way through August to the beginning of October. So from the 4th of August to the 4th of October here, this person's chart would have more of an elevated level of stress. Now, here's the other thing. These are just the dates of when those things happen exactly, but you might want to consider that a few days before you'll be feeling it coming in, and a few days after you'll be feeling it pass out. So this isn't like a continuous stream, but it feels very bumpy from the beginning of August to the beginning of October. So that's something to watch out for. So you can see when your bumpy times might be. Other things to bear in mind would be to look at the outer planets and also look at the nodes. Are there any outer planets aspecting your sun and the moon? You'd find that Neptune and Saturn had just, well, they're just like nestled in between these two right now. You might also consider where Pluto is. You might also consider where Uranus is. Again, this is a completely made up chart, the 31st of March, like today's date. And I took it back so many years. Then you might also wonder where the nodes are, you know, in terms of your angles and your sun and the moon. Now, I know the nodes are around here right now, so they wouldn't be playing into this, but you might find if you've got nodes playing into these angles or the sun or the moon, then again, that volume of stress is just turned up just that little bit higher. So I hope that was helpful in recognizing some of the difficult times that come up. And, you know, just because of the way our charts are patterned, you'll find some people who've got really polarized charts, you know, like where you've got a really potent side and then something in opposition. They will really feel the energies of that so much more, especially if you're born at the time of the full moon, because you're naturally predisposed to that eternal question and tension that the oppositions bring about. If you've got, like, say, a couple of big conjunctions or stelliums, so for instance, I've got two stelliums, one in Sagittarius, one in Pisces, and they are in a square to each other. So when I get things in the other two mutable signs, so in Gemini and Virgo, in opposition to mine, they form a grand cross to my natal planets. You know, it's easy. Once you get used to your chart and once you get used to using an ephemeris and checking through where things are, you'll start to notice. But, you know, if this has been helpful, my advice to you is start writing, start journaling, or just make a little note, like a little spreadsheet on a computer every now and again. You say, I had a really bad day. Just like mark down when these difficult times are, or even do some investigative astrology. Write a list of the most challenging times you've had in the last 3 years. Note what months they were in, and then start looking at the charts. Was there a full moon near, you know, one of those places that I've already mentioned? And as you start doing that, you're starting to really live the astrology and starting to use it in a really practical way. So hope that was helpful. You know, failing all that, come and join me in my community where you know, A, we're learning about astrology, B, where I'm giving a lot more forecasts, and also C, I've got a little tab in my community now. So if you've got a problem, you can post your chart up there. And, you know, if anyone's hanging out and wants to chat or wants to write their thoughts, you might be able to learn from each other. You know, I think sometimes the best thing we can do is just recognize what's going on, because once we recognize where it might be coming from, all of a sudden we feel a little bit better. It's so much harder, isn't it, when we feel like something is not quite right, but we can't quite put our finger on it. So this is where I think astrology can be very helpful. But anyway, loads of love to you. Feel good and speak to you soon. Bye.